Whoa, we were back with some Bleach Soul Resonance, and we're getting into the Mega Thread a bit earlier than usual because we are probably going to have a few more new players kicking around due to the massive returning and, just new player rewards if you get into the game right now. Bleach Soul Resonance is extremely easy to get into. It's very fun hack and slash. It makes the perfect second or primary gacha, if I'm honest, because it covers a great IP. The game looks incredible, and I feel like the overhead on free to play accessibility is really low, really easy. So let's get into it. Of course, shout out Comprehensive Toe for keeping the questions thread going, and let's check it out. So can someone explain all the ailment damage and that kind of thing, buffs and debuffs? Because I've been playing like a month and I'm level 60, but I can't find an explanation anywhere. So, and I'm sure this person goes over it, but let's go over it ourselves. So ailment damage, for in the most lackadaisical, the most layman's sense, is just dot DPS. That's all you really need to think of it as. You can have characters who do more ailment damage, but all you really need to know is that if you ever see a character who has an ailment type like here, like cleave, it inflicts damage based on extra ailment damage, then it means that it can be a primary source of damage dealing for that character. So right now I have 57.6% ailment damage on my Kenpachi. The thing about Kenpachi though is without at least boundary 2, which you see right here, it is sort of unwieldy to get enough ailment damage to make it your sole focus, because your stats will be spread too thin, right? They knew this. What ailment damage for a character like Kenpachi does, which I'm focusing on Kenpachi because he's the newest character, so I'd imagine, and Nell is coming, so I imagine a lot of people are wondering about characters like Kenpachi, right? The thing about Kenpachi is he can still get by with pumping crit damage and crit rate, but if he can find ailment damage after getting boundary 2, he accelerates in power quite a bit. Characters who are more ailment damage focused, like Gin on the other hand, who was our previous character, they're sort of filling out the ailment damage role right now, can make primary use of ailment damage bonus while putting minimal effort into crit rate. And characters like him, just to focus in on him, typically aren't going to be strict attack percent carries, strict crit rate carries without multiple dupes in him. So it's kind of the other way around, where instead you can focus primarily on raising his ailment damage bonus as much as possible, and his kit rewards that. It's why characters like Rangiku, who actually gives her ailment damage bonus to her allies, is very enjoyable, because she'll give an amount of this ailment damage percent, much like Yorahara will in the case of his crit rate or crit damage buff. He's going to give a percent of his crit damage to his allies, right? So that is the over-under. Is just think of ailment damage as, we have an ailment listed here, so lacerate, wound, impale, and cleave, and that damage, if it is listed on your character, will probably be one of the primary sources of damage for that character. Maybe in the future they'll put out, core stamps and the like that are generic, that'll give ailment damage to someone, but in this case, having any ailment damage whatsoever on a character like Toshido literally doesn't do anything. Buffs and debuffs. Buffs and debuffs are pretty simple to track. Characters like Aizen are a great example, because Aizen has... God, he has a wall of text. But he has a bunch of debuffs located within his kit, that he inflicts. Inflicting one extra stack of like Ravage. And these are debuffs. And the debuffs essentially give you, or give them, defense down in other gacha terms. If you ever put defense down on a character, that's a pretty invaluable debuff to put on a character. As well as you can get, portions of his kit through his core stamp that actually buff crit damage. But I think the most simple buff that everyone will be familiar with is just playing Yorahara and getting the crit damage buff from his ultimate. Is an endlessly powerful one in particular. He is one of the true standouts, I think, as far as supports go, and is going to continue to be. So, you know, just think of debuffs as things your characters do before rotating out to the other stronger DPS characters. So Yodahara comes in, he does his flirt, he does his like short rotation, he swaps out to Kenpachi or any other DPS for that matter, and they come in and do their damage, right? I hope that's pretty simple. Whoops. I just want to know when it actively works. Controller sport, yeah, tough. What are all the messes of obtaining Jades? Yeah, someone puts it here. Events, dailies, all the modes in the challenge tab, and then only once for the first time completion of every mission, story, adventure, etc. Probably 90% of Jades come from events and dailies. Yeah, it's true. When you're playing this game and you know you're actually like locked in, you're gonna get a ton of Jades from actually like clicking on this tab and just going on the list. So we got 400 here, we got 800 here. We have a bunch of tickets here, which for the price of for the case of this like argument, I will be counting as Jade because it costs Jade to get all of these materials. Like it costs Jade to get these. We got 800. We've got a bunch here. I don't know how much it was in total because you have to go through the actual count. So 120, 120, 360, 480. So 480 there. We've got 1200 here if you do everything here, which was pretty easy to do. We've got a bunch more here again if you just click the rewards. It's kind of hard to keep track of the reward track in this case, but hundreds here. And then this was just his reveal, right? Yeah, this is just his reveal, which you get 20 for there. Beyond that, we also have, I think a primary source would be getting your Frenzy Feast team done. That way you can collect the, you know, hundreds and hundreds. I think it's like might be like 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, and 680 in total for getting your Frenzy Feast team up. This is why I specify that you need to get comfortable with putting characters on these teams and that aren't always Kisuke and Aizen. That way you can hit this 70,000 cap and get your total rewards every week. It's really, really powerful. Getting, you know, 680 Jade every week in the span of, you know, 3 weeks is almost 2 multis, right? Now, I'm really quick math, like I'm not really like focusing. They just added this, which I have not completely gotten into yet, but I've got to finish popping these, but you get 50 for each completion here. So that is also another one, right? Like, you know, it's like a ton of Jades lying around. There's towers. There's the strategy index here. Like a bunch lying around in bits and odds and ends. But I think the primary ones are doing your weekly events, skimming through your trials at least at first, and doing the actual event tab itself. Once you have all of that cleared, you could sort of passively gain Jade, not counting the main story, which is going to give you a ton, an absolute ton, as you just sort of slowly progress through it. Okay. I have full 160 pulls to get B6 Geen, though I'm not sure if it's worth like damage wise. Kenny goes nuts at B6, so is Geen the same. I usually average around 200 to 300 million before. If any Geen mains can argue if it's worth. Thanks in advance. Obviously, you know, most people aren't going to be whales, so it's going to be hard for them to just show up in this thread and help out. I will say that boundaries work in breakpoints. So let's use Kenpachi because I think is the most obvious. Having B1 on Kenpachi is really good, but B2 is what I would consider his breakpoint because his B2 essentially changes entirely what the character's stamp build is going to look like. Then you go here and you get some level ups. You go here, increase the damage dealt by all sever attacks. You know, it's pretty good. But B5, or actually, looks like B6. Yeah, B6. There we go. So I would say that B2 and B6 look to be the break points for Kenpachi. Each time an on-field enemy is inflicted with cleave, Kenpachi's crit damage and damage are increased by 30% and 20%, respectively, for 30 seconds, stacking up to 2 times. So you need to just like look at the character, right? B1, really good. B2, extremely good. B3, 4, and 5, B6, crazy. So if we look at Geens, gains 3 technique points immediately when entering the battle. Fully restores technique after releasing the ultimate. It's okay. Yeah, that's fine. For every 1 technique point consumed, the crit damage of the next ultimate is increased by 35%, stacking up to 6 times. Hitting the enemy with the final strike of the basic attack reduces technique points recovery time by 2 seconds. That's fucking crazy. Pretty good. Yeah, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. And then crazy, right? So this essentially makes it so Geen isn't just a ailment merchant, essentially. He's also like an incredible attack percent merchant. Like he becomes like a really strong like on hit character. So you're essentially like, you know, you're having to like grapple. You're having to grapple with the idea of like, okay, I'm at B4, which is like fine. If you want B6, you're essentially changing how the character operates entirely. That's like Geen's this is like changing Geen's kit essentially from the ground up, right? Another one is Aizen. You know, last one. This is really good. This is okay. You know, I mean, it's good if you're playing, you know, spirit characters. It's good. This is okay. This is fucking crazy. This makes him literally a solo DPS if you ever get him to boundary 4. So in Aizen's case, we understand now that it's B1 and B4 are his breakpoints. That's how I'd look at it. So in the case of Geen, if you like Geen, then like if he's your favorite character and all you want to do is get a B6 Geen, like you're gonna use him for a while, then yeah, why not? Is he gonna be? Because like, are they gonna release a character in the near future, right? This, like if you're someone who's like a low spender, are they going to release a B0 thrust character that's better than your B6 Geen? No, not for not until like next year probably. There will, even in the case of like Kenpachi, if you love Bankai Ichigo and you dupe for Bankai Ichigo or something, even if Kenpachi's a monster and you have like 2 dupes in him, it's like Bankai 4 Ichigo is still better. You know what I mean? Like that's sort of the odds and ends we have to, you know, correlate, right? Like they're going to release power crept DPSs and they're going to release a character whose boundary 1 thrust is going to be better than Geen's boundary 3. But they're not going to release one whose boundary 1 is better than a Geen at boundary 6. So it really is just, do you love that character? Is Geen, will playing a very strong Geen make you very, very happy? Then yeah, you can go for it. I wouldn't. It's if you're like a low spender or a free to play. But if you're like a low spender to whale, then yeah, I think it's fine. I can't give you exact numbers, but that's how I look at it. If you're wondering, because a lot of people are re-rolling right now, so maybe you have excess currency because you're re-rolling, the game's completely new, you have all this currency, you're like, I want Aizen and I want, you know, dupes in him. Aizen's gonna reward you for putting dupes in him, but he's specifically gonna reward you for putting 1 dupe in him or 4 dupes in him. I got my Go Zaraki at B1, but don't know if I should get B2 or get Nell. I got a B1 before buff, but don't know if it's worth post buff or if Nell is overall better. You want Nell. You want Nell. This is something I talk about a lot, but supports long term are going to be more impactful for your account than duped DPSs, because at the end of the day, you need to fill these teams out, and we're still running Yodohara every single place we can, and we're still running Aizen every single place we can, right? Like Aizen, if you put 1 dupe in him instead of like 4, you know, 1 extra dupe in Kenpachi, like completely changes your runs. So getting a little bit of ailment damage on Kenpachi so you can get crit does feel really good, right? It changes your build because you run a crit damage second piece. You'll get to like 80% or 90% crit rate with your new buffed core stamp. You'll get a bunch more ailment damage. But one of the things we sort of know about him is that actually raising the power, raising the boundaries of his Blade of Lament is maybe even more important than that. You could argue that if you're hovering about 87% crit rate like I am, this is 67% here, but he gets 20% from his core stamp. You could argue that instead of going another dupe on him, you could go a dupe on his weapon stamp, which is much less costly because it's only 40 for a dupe, right? Whereas you could get Aizen to put on your Gin and Kenpachi teams, which is like Nell essentially, you know, Ailment, Nell. And from what we can assume from leaks, and I'm not going to take leaks at face value, I'm just going to say, you know, grain of salt. From what we can assume, Nell's dupes are crazy. Nell might be the first character that I grab one dupe of in my summoning session. Genuinely. So that's another big thing to sort of consider is there's a character who's coming who's a support, so it's more important to your overall account health as she's a support. And she's going to have what we seem to think is going to be a crazy dupe. So we'll see. But I would definitely suggest Nell first. So Nell can work with Kenpachi at all? Yes. I assume if that's just the question, then yes. If I get B1 Aizen, should I pull Rukia? Put Rukia with Kenpachi team and him in Spirit team? Or other way around? So your current teams are Strike, Sajin, Yoruichi, Yudahara. That's fine. Byakuya, Kenpachi, Yachiru. This is really good. This is a great budget team. I talk about this all the time. For people who don't have really great gear, my Kenpachi now has 87% crit rate. Before that, my crit rate my overall DPS could actually be boosted by using Yachiru instead of Yudahara because I was just critting more with Yachiru. I made a video on it. Spirit, Rukia, Shikai Ichigo, hopefully later Bankai or Vassal Lord Ichigo. That's not going to be your Spirit team, but okay. And Orihime. Thrust is Tosen, Gin, and Rangiku. So your teams would essentially be Yachiru, Nellel, Kenpachi. You don't want to put Nellel on, and this is where we're gonna have a larger conversation, right? This is why we're gonna have a larger conversation. People are like, Tozen is completely dead and power crept by, you know, Nellel coming out. No. Because what this allows you to do as a free-to-play player is you make Tozen, Gin, and Rangiku your thrust team still. You put Nell on Kenpachi's team. Powerful. Helps your slash team a ton. You put Aizen on Spirit, which is a much weaker team than either of these two. Like, by leaps and bounds. So if I get B1 Aizen, should I put Rukia with Kenpachi team? You should put Aizen on your Spirit team. Aizen on your Spirit team, and you just sort of like cope it. Yeah, you just cope it. I think what you'd run is your strike team would stay the same, obviously. On your slash team, you'd run Nell, Kenpachi, Yachiru, to me. Spirit team, you'd run Aizen, and then whatever DPS you can come up with. Your Spirit team is just going to be weaker. That just is what it is. The majority of the damage is going to come from Aizen, especially if you get B1 Aizen. And for Thresh, you just run this core. This core is fine. You don't have to change it. And I think that's the most like free-to-play friendly way you can handle this team without having to, like, offload characters on the thrust team. Your thrust team is fine. So I don't know if anyone can help, but I'll just ask in case. I've been playing the game so far on max stands without any lagging. Maybe I built Toasted and Rangiku to make a proper Moro team. I'm going to assume our Kaname's off-field attacks combined with making my device lag. No. Without losing much quality. I don't have any answer to that, honestly. Should I B1 Keyscape if I do not have Sajin? Yeah, because the more you pull on standard, the more chance you get of getting a B2 Yudahara, which is, it's just great. Got all characters at B0 except for Kenny at B1. Do I go for B1 Aizen? B1 Aizen. If it's going to be between B1 Aizen and Kenny, B1 Aizen. Doesn't mean I'll ask for some same for now. Yeah, B1 Aizen. Again, with breakpoints, right? So Kenpachi, his breakpoint is 2. However, you can build to alleviate this breakpoint now because he is much better. He got buffed. B1 Aizen is much better. He's incredible, right? This would be considered like his first real breakpoint. Getting a B1 Aizen increases the character's power a ton. Getting a B2 Kenpachi, not only are you putting more work into a DPS character who's going to be replaced faster, but you're also getting what is sort of minor gains. Because again, if you want to talk about duping Kenpachi after a certain point, you actually want dupes in his weapon stamp, from what we know. So I think that is my go-to. But this video is getting a little long, so we're gonna tail off after a few more. BSR is the probability to get SSR in the early stage higher than in MiHoYo games under the rates, but honestly, I haven't had a 50-50 in Genshin since the end of 24, and I haven't been able to get a character in an early pity. I'm speaking of BSR. I got B1 Gin in 10 tickets. Also today, I got B1 for in 10 tickets. I don't know the exact rates, but so money I got this game was worth in this game, yeah. Yeah, I don't know the exact rates, but I do know that BSR, by comparison, is just a, like, easy to, you know, put a few dollars into Bleach game. It's why I play free to play, because I want to give people who don't want to put anything in a window into how their account can look. So that is why I've like consistently been like the free to play option, which is the better choice. B1 Gin or B1 Aizen or Weapon Dupes. I mean, it's gonna be Aizen, right? Yeah, if those are your options, you're better off saving from Jades. Yeah, I think this is true. I think do not, if you're a free to play player, don't obsess over boundaries, right? Boundary True Aizen, B1 Gin. Let's look at the breakpoint again. Let's check, because I don't remember off the top of my head what Gin's is. But me not remembering is probably a bad sign for Gin. No, that's not good enough. This is the breakpoint for Gin. Manhunt is the first time you could consider doing anything with Gin's boundaries. This is not good enough. Yeah, don't do dupes. Don't do dupes in this case. No way. Last one. Which is a better piece for Aizen? I have him at B60, so you guys might not be able to see this very well, but it's a crit damage piece. Oh, you have a B0, sorry. Crit damage piece on piece 2 with crit rate, or crit rate with crit damage. So 3. I think the leftmost piece is a better piece because it has more complementary stats. But here's the thing, and this will be the last point. If your characters aren't critting because they don't have enough crit rate, then having a billion crit damage doesn't do anything. So here you can see that my Aizen is 56.2% crit rate. He's getting a portion of that crit rate. Sorry. Wild clicks. He's getting a portion of that crit rate from his weapon, 25%, right? And then he's getting like an amount from his other sources, right? 11% here. No crit rate on this piece. I could... Honestly, this would probably be the piece I change if I'm going to change anything on him, but I feel like his kit is fine right now where it is in my experience, so I haven't been changing him around. But this percentage here, if this isn't at least like 60, you know, over 50%, 60%, hopefully like 70-ish%, then going, do I need a crit damage main stat like on piece 2 is just not worth it. That was the problem with Kenny for a long time, is that it was very hard to get him to these upper levels. But now, because of his core stamp, this is adding a 20% chance crit rate, or 20% buff to your crit rate for 30 seconds. And it's really easy to maintain, which means that, you know, my crit rate on Kenpachi as a completely boundaryless player is 87%. So it makes this crit damage, even though it's only 103% by comparison to Aizen's, really shine, and it makes his overall like impression with his cleave and the like very powerful, right? So I do still get those big swings with Aizen where, you know, 56% of the time his ultimate skill, you know, his boundary when he's in his actual, yeah, I will stand atop the heavens, it hits for like 4 million. But I could certainly have a more consistent Aizen if I just had a tiny bit more, right? But yeah, that's gonna be it for now. That was about 23-ish minutes, 24 minutes of answering people's questions. So for now, I'm gonna call it. Hopefully this was insightful if you're a new player. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the club, we all go make it, and peace.